who is paying for this wedding? Because we have mentioned thousands and thousands of dollars, 5 figures to 6 figure weddings. So who's paying? Hello and welcome back to my channel, and if this is your first time here, hello, welcome. This is Essential Patience and I Am Patience, and on this channel we have conversations regarding society's impact on our lives and our finances, and how we can take back that power and live more intentional lives and make more intentional decisions in our lives and our financial standing for our own well-being. So if that sounds good to you, be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell so you do not miss out on any of my future videos. In today's video, we are talking about weddings, and in the spirit of weddings, I am wearing white. I think we're still in wedding season, probably on the tail end of wedding season, but we do know that white is considered a significant color in most Western weddings. And if you all see the lighting change as time goes on, it's because the sun is going down. But I wanted to film this video today, so let's go in and I hope that at least the lighting turns out halfway decent. I'm having a lot of faith in this. So weddings, let's first start with like a definition, or at least what we think of when we think of weddings. So weddings have long been a significant cultural and societal milestone, symbolizing the union of two individuals and the merging of their families. I think in Western society there's less merging of families and more just two individuals, while in a lot of other places such as Africa and Asia, it's a whole merging of families. Like, they take that very seriously. We can all admit that the significant financial burdens that are attached to weddings in modern day today has escalated drastically. So in this video, we're going to be exploring what goes into a wedding and why it costs so much to have a wedding in today, as well as the historical importance, because some people will just be like, oh, it's just a wedding, it's no big deal. But there are years, decades, centuries of historical relevance of weddings. Even though there is this illusion of choice, in some areas it's harder to make that call. We are also going to talk about the impact of family on it, because like I said, the illusion of choice, as well as the impact of social media. It's hard to find a part of our lives that is not impacted by social media. So marriage has existed since the Garden of Eden. I don't remember there being a wedding, at least according to the Bible, but there was definitely marriage, and there was marriage before there was family. So especially to the Christian faith, marriage is the original covenant, foundation of mankind and family. Weddings have held cultural and societal importance throughout history. In many societies, weddings are not just a union of two individuals, but also the alliances between families, tribes, and nations. Traditionally, weddings were community events involving friends, family, and neighbors in the celebration of the union. In ancient Rome, weddings were elaborate affairs with rituals and feasts, while medieval Europe, they were often large public events symbolizing political and social alliances. Over time, the extravagance of weddings were evolved, reflecting change in societal values and economic conditions. So when you look at different points in history in different parts of the world, you will see the scale of weddings change according to whatever period of time they were in. So say weddings in the Crusades don't look like weddings in the Industrial Revolution. But today, weddings come with a huge price tag, and it's not just the main wedding, because sometimes people be like, it's just one day, you're spending so much money on one day. If only it was one day. It includes pre-wedding events, the attire, the vendors, all of that, and the overarching influence of social media just exacerbates it. So let's start with the pre-wedding events. This is less talked about in America, I'll say the Western world, versus other parts of the world. I couldn't imagine people getting married without an engagement party when I was younger, but here a lot of people don't do engagement parties. There are other events that they do have. So engagement parties, they are to announce the engagement of the couple, and this can cost a few hundred to a few $1,000 depending on how big the celebration is. In the African community, specifically in Ghanaian culture, traditional wedding has become the engagement. So oftentimes it will cost you thousands of dollars, and people do treat these engagement weddings as an actual wedding, because traditionally it would have been. People would typically do an engagement there and then have the religious wedding as their official wedding with this sign. So that is very prevalent in non-Western culture, but something that's prevalent in Western culture is the bridal shower. The bridal shower includes the hosting of friends and family to celebrate the bride and to shower her with love and adoration and attention. This can also cost a few $100s to thousands of dollars depending on how big you want your bridal shower to be. Then there is the bachelor and bachelorette parties, which can also cost a few hundreds to a few thousands of dollars. And typically these are parties thrown for the bride separately for the bachelorette party and the groom separately for the bachelor party, and typically they are gendered. This is not common in a lot of cultures. Maybe one day we'll go into bachelor and bachelorette parties culture, but today's not the day. But why even throw a party when you can go on vacation? Apparently bachelor and bachelorette trips are becoming very popular. I think if you have the money, definitely do it. But this can also be a huge burden, not just on the bride and the groom, but also the wedding party, because oftentimes they have to contribute for their stay. I think it's good to tell people ahead of time so they can treat it as, let's say, their vacation for the year. But sometimes I think, why go on the trip where you're going to go on your honeymoon anyway? But that's just my opinion. It can cost anywhere from a few hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars. At each of these events, you need a new outfit. That is a whole different added cost. And these are all before you even get to the wedding. So let's start getting to the weddings and talk about the cost. According to Forbes Advisor, the average cost of a wedding in 2024 is $33,000. This is a 14% increase from the previous year in 2023, and definitely an increase from 2022, where the average wedding was about $29,000. And the average is distributed according to states. Some states are more expensive to have a wedding in versus other states. For example, in New York City, where it's very expensive, the average wedding is about $49,866, and in DC it is $47,917. You can compare this to cheaper states such as Alabama, where the average wedding is about $22,321, and in Arkansas, where the average wedding is about $18,438. And this cost includes vendors and outfits. But let's start with the outfits. According to the Knot, if you're wondering how much the average wedding dress costs, remember that individual customizations can affect the price. The dress style, designer alterations, and additions of extras to make it uniquely yours can impact the final price. And in a survey of nearly 10,000 US couples, the average cost of a wedding dress in 2022 was $2,000. In the year 2022, it was $1,900, and it was $1,800 in 2021. So it seems to be increasing by $100 every single year. And if you're an avid watcher of Say Yes to the Dress like I was, you would know that most dresses that were sold were in the 4-figure range, but it can go as high as the 5-figure range. But it was very few times you would see a dress cost under $1,000. And oftentimes they would show the dresses and they were very cute, but I had seen a dress, it was like in the $900 range, and it was so beautiful. But this was years ago, and it was one of the cheaper dresses I had ever seen on the show. I always wondered why brides did not go for a custom dress, because I thought that if you get a custom dress from, say, your local seamstress, it will be much cheaper. And maybe it would be, but if you do get it custom made from like a bridal dressmaker, you can expect to pay about 20% more than an off-the-rack dress, which now makes sense as to why a lot of brides will opt to get their dress off the rack rather than get something custom made, because you run the risk of it not looking like the way you want it to look like, but then also it costs more. And at this point, that $2,000 average is only for the ceremony dress. We have not even talked about the reception dress. A lot of brides do change into a second dress for the reception, and if you're very extra, you can change into a third dress. It's becoming more and more common to see people have an after party dress, which I guess is something I can do if your wedding is running all the way past midnight, but I've seen it more and more. And there's some people who have even more than that, more than 3 dresses, which I wonder how will you have time to make those consistent changes. It's like, don't you just want to be at your wedding and enjoy it? I would not want to have to make so many changes on that day that goes by so quickly. But if they like it, I love it. For men, however, the cost is slightly less. According to Wedding Wire, the average groom in the United States spends about $350 on his attire, a price tag that has gone up over the past few years. If you're having a more formal or black tie wedding, a tuxedo is the must. While wedding tuxedo prices do vary, the average tux in the United States ranges from $200 to about $499, so definitely less than the actual wedding dress. And a lot of men don't do a second outfit change, and they can also rewear this tuxedo several times. It's not like something too custom or too wedding coded. They can wear it throughout their lives, versus women, that wedding dress they're only gonna wear it once, unless they buy something that is super casual and they can wear other places. Now that we've talked about the outfits, let's go to the vendors, because this is where the real money starts coming out. On average, couples hire about 10 vendors for their weddings, and these professionals can cost a lot of money. And so we're going to go through these professionals and give you a range, and then you will start to see how the cost starts adding up easily. And these are even just like the basics, because it can go up from here. So starting with the venue can be one of the priciest parts of many weddings. In 2024, the average wedding venue costs between $6,500 and $12,000 for 100 people. However, sometimes they do include catering, so the cost of your venue plus catering, if you add it, can vary. But this is just for 100 people. Imagine weddings that are 200, 300, 400, and over 500 people. This cost can add up even more. And a lot of weddings that I have gone to are over 200 people, typically anywhere from 300 to 500 range. Next is the catering. So you can add it to the venue, or you can decide to get your own catering. But according to the Knot 2023 Real Wedding Study, the average price was $85 per person. There wasn't a big difference in the average cost when the wedding guest count came into play. For a wedding of 50 guests, the average catering cost was $85 per person. And for weddings between 51 and 100 guests, it averaged about $84 per person. For couples over 100 loved ones, it averaged about $86 per person. Some people have alcohol at their weddings, and if you do decide to have alcohol, you're looking on average about $2,800 additional to the catering cost. In 2023, 18% of couples served beer and wine only at their wedding. 5% opted for cash bars. 7% chose not to have any type of alcohol, having a dry wedding. Next are flowers. I did not expect flowers to cost so much. I was shooken when I saw a video quoting flowers alone at about $30,000.
This is what $30,000 worth of flowers looks like. My best friend got married this past weekend, and while the venue was gorgeous, it was really brought to life with the flowers. The wedding was held in Mexico City, and so I can't even imagine what it would cost in the States. There were many different rooms at this venue, and each of them had a different look for the flowers, and they just kept on giving. This is the dining area where we all had dinner, and you can see the centerpieces are absolutely gorgeous. The boys were eventually given some boutonnieres, and of course we had bouquets for both the bride and the bridesmaids. Another perk of all these flowers is that it smelled so good in every room you went into. After the dinner and reception, there was eventually an after party where some of the floral arrangements were converted into hanging disco balls.
Luckily, that is not the average, and we can be happy about it, but it's still expensive, averaging about $2,500 to $6,000, and these are 2024 figures. Next, you need a photographer to capture your perfect day. You want to get a professional photographer because you can't rely on people's iPhones and people to give you the footage later. So most people will get a photographer. You can expect to pay about $3,500 to $6,500 for your photographer on average, but then also you may want a videographer to capture video of your wedding, and that can cost you an additional $3,000 to $6,000. And while this is very expensive, I think that it could be very much worth it, because those photos will be for a lifetime. Maybe years back when you don't remember as clearly, looking at those photos to show your children about the life that started on that day can just be very rewarding. I love looking at wedding pictures, and I think they're very worth it. And for the videographer to document your day, you can look back on it and see where your commitments and your covenant began. Find one that would capture the day and the essence of the day that you will always remember. Next is the entertainment. So again, a DJ that can cost you anywhere from $2,000 to about $7,000, and you could also opt out for a band or a different type of entertainment, but typically you're gonna pay in that range. Next is transportation, as it's very unlikely they're gonna be driving your Honda or your Corolla or Prius to your wedding. wedding. So you're probably gonna get a car, like a limo, convertible, or some sort of classic car in order to go in or out in style. So because of that, you do have to budget for it. It can cost you anywhere from $700 to about $1,200. But you can get creative in this route. Next, you're also looking at the wedding cake. That does not come with a catering. Expect to pay anywhere from $600 to $900 on average, depending on what type of cake that you want, the flavors, and how big you want the cake. Sometimes it can cost even more, but now I know that a lot of people would put in fake cake within the cake. Couple levels are cakes, and then the rest are just like styrofoam. All that cake doesn't go to waste, which I think is a very creative idea. And before your guests get to eat cake, you have to invite them. So you're gonna have to mail those invitations.
This has got to be the most stunning, beautiful, coolest, emotional, like thoughtful wedding invitation I've ever received. My best friend Erin is getting married, and she created an entire magazine as her invitation.
On the first page, we've got a table of contents, a Bible verse that no one ever uses for their wedding, you know, and then their story, how they met, how they got to this point in their life, the venue details, how many seats we get, a timeline of the wedding, hotel recommendations, a link to their online registry, and this cute little like removable Polaroid to put on your fridge. And then this last page, this is the page that made me cry actual tears. Also more attention to detail. They had this little custom sticker with the two flags representing their cultures, and then their first date was actually in a convertible in Cuba, so paying homage to that. We love it.
I see a lot of people today doing digital invitations, which can still cost money, but on average expect to spend anywhere from $400 to $600 on invitations. And for premium invitations, it can cost all the way up to about $6,000 and even more. But I do see a trend in a lot of digital invitations that are saving people hundreds of dollars. Next is makeup and hair. So depending on who you book, you can expect to pay anywhere from about $550 to about $850 and more, because nowadays I've seen some ridiculous prices on social media. So if you're getting somebody off of social media who has a very premium price or premium clientele list, be prepared to pay more, and they will give you that classic wedding makeup looking, classic wedding glow. Next is a wedding planner. A lot of people do cut out this cost by planning their own weddings or having somebody in your family plan their wedding or friend. Expect to pay anywhere from about $2,100 to about $10,000 or more, depending on how in demand that wedding planner is. And a wedding planner is not a wedding coordinator. I had to find out that those are two different people. And so if you do hire a wedding coordinator as well, expect to pay anywhere from $1,000 to about $8,000 for them to coordinate your big day. But I have also heard about wedding planners and or coordinators getting a percentage of your budget, like 10%. So if your wedding costs like $50,000, then you pay them $5,000. I'm not exactly sure how that works. And if your budget changes, if they get more out of it, or if it goes less, if they get less money. There is the engagement ring, of course. This is typically even way before the wedding. Obviously, you have to get engaged. And on average, US couples are spending about $6,000 on the engagement ring, or the engagement ring for the woman. Some couples get for both. This can be high or low depending on the gem, the cut, where you buy it. If you go for a premium place, it could be the same value as a cheaper place, but you pay more because of the name. Say a Tiffany's versus a Costco ring, you expect to pay more at Tiffany's. And then you also have the wedding bands that you exchange on your wedding day. The price of wedding bands ranges from as low as $180 to about $2,000. And in 2019, the average wedding band for a man was reported to be about $510, and for the woman it was about $1,000. Typically the woman's ring will have like a few diamonds on there or something really cute. That's probably why it costs more, and the wedding industry knows that they can get more money out of women. So it could be the exact same band, but just because for a woman it costs more. All of those that I listed will probably be seen as the basics. In the modern world today and in the social media age, wedding trends are becoming a thing. So you may have your wedding and it's cute, but it could have been cuter if you had some of these things, not my opinion. So let's go over some of these things that are increasing the price of weddings. So one of the first trends is getting a wedding stylist. This is a person who will style your entire wedding, so the bride, the groom, and the wedding party, to elevate their styles and make them look elegant. Whatever aesthetic they're going for, they will essentially plan the outfit to go with that. And they will run you anywhere from $1,500 to about $8,700. If you are very much into your wedding being elevated into an elegant style, that you need somebody else to do it for you and you're willing to pay. Another one that I've been seeing, and I don't think this one is actually bad at all because I find it to be inexpensive and very cute, is getting a digital guest book. From what I know from this digital guest book, guests can leave notes, but they can also upload photos that they took that day. So somebody may have a beautiful shot and you'll be able to get that photo. Because sometimes I see wedding guests that have the most beautiful photo that the photographer was not able to capture. You may never get it. It's a good way for them to upload their photos and you can sift through and maybe just see the wedding from their perspective. I think that makes it very interesting. And typically you can find this for anywhere from $15 to $30. Some could be more, some could be less, but I don't think it's a bad way to go considering how inexpensive it is for such a meaningful part of your wedding. And another one I've been seeing more and more on social media is live wedding painters. I don't think this was popular pre-2020. Personally, never seen one at a wedding anywhere, but I've been seeing it more and more between last year and this year. And the live wedding painter will essentially paint a snippet of your wedding, typically with the bride and groom, sometime guests, sometime bridal party. The bride and groom may be dancing. Typically they are more together and it doesn't focus too much on the guests, but it's supposed to capture the moment. And so the painter was set up like at the beginning of the reception, and then by the middle to end of reception they will reveal the painting. And this can cost you anywhere from $600 to over $10,000. I have seen some paintings and I'm like, I don't know if it's worth it. Typically I see the price tag being about $2,000. There's something special about painting versus pictures, but if you're paying a photographer already, you may say, do I need painting as well? But then it looks really beautiful, it's special, but sometimes it doesn't always turn out the way you want it to. I don't want to judge anybody's art because art is subjective. If it was me and I paid a couple $1,000s for some of these pictures, I would want a refund. Next is another trend I've been seeing on social media, which is proposing to your bridesmaids.
This is how much I spent on all 8 of my bridesmaid proposal boxes. The vinyl was $1 each, the box was $10.87 each, and the tissue paper was $4. The perfume was $208, and the engraving was $20 per name. The Briogeo hair treatment was $59.50, and the super serum is $56.99. Elf lip oil is $10.99, and SC nail polish is $10.97. The gua sha tools were about $2 each. Rare Beauty blush is $36. The silk pillowcases were $9 for 2. The sponges were $6 for 4. Hair scrunchies were $12 for 8. The cookies I got were $5 each. I printed all the paper from Staples and it cost about $30. The Lancome mascara was $45 and the YSL lip gloss is $53. Does anyone want to tell me the total cost?
There's one for the groomsmen as well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with giving gifts to your bridesmaids because a lot of time they have to pay for their dresses, their hair, their makeup, and then maybe the Airbnb or hotel they're going to be staying in for the day, and they do so much. So there's nothing wrong with giving them gifts, but this whole proposing thing is becoming very popular on social media, and it can cost anywhere from $50 per bridesmaid to over $250 per bridesmaid. So even before you start planning your wedding, or even before you start the main events of the wedding, you're already shelling out a lot of money to propose to your bridesmaid. Honestly, sometimes I think it would just be worth it giving them a check. Then it can go towards what they're actually going to be spending on your wedding. Next is a social media content creator. So this is the person who'll be doing some reels for your videos, maybe sending it to some bridal pages, doing the hashtag, making your wedding go viral. We have seen a lot of viral videos of weddings this year and last year, and that's because content creators for weddings and promoters of a wedding has become very popular. I think this used to be more of a celebrity upper class thing, but now it's becoming an everyday wedding. Now every wedding I go to has a content creator who's doing some reels with the bride or groom and making TikToks way before they come down and walk down the aisle. You can pay anywhere from $500 to $5,000 for these content creators, depending on how popular they are or how much you're willing to pay for. Some of them will price you per reel, per day's work, or even how long your wedding is going to take. Next is after wedding snacks. I've hardly ever been to weddings where I get this. It sounds nice, but it can be costly. This is essentially giving snacks to your wedding guests after they've eaten, but but right as they're about to leave or the wedding's closing down. Some people do fast food, some people just do a bunch of snacks, cupcakes. It's separate from the actual wedding dessert. Some people do a dessert bar or a snack bar. It can cost anywhere from $5 to $10 per guest. So if you have a wedding of 100 to 300 people, you expect to pay anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 for these snacks. Next is a photo or video booth. I've seen a lot of video booths now, but photo booths are also making a comeback, and you can rent these for $300 to $600 for your wedding day. So did that sound exhausting or what? Like, so many costs. With all of these things, some of them may sound well priced, but a lot of them are marked up, and it's called the wedding markup. So let's go into that section to talk about the increased price for wedding services. The term wedding markup refers to the increased price of goods and services when associated with a wedding. This practice significantly inflates costs. You can see the wedding markup in venues, catering, makeup and hair, videographers and photographers, and DJs. In an article titled, "Yes, we charge more for weddings and don't trust anybody who doesn't," it states, "What about non-weddings? If we get a call to provide music for a company holiday or a school homecoming dance, live music services will cost about the same as at a wedding, but our DJ services are offering 30 to 40% less. We're not alone. Each business does things differently, but typically we can expect event planners, videographers, photographers, entertainers, hair and makeup, and services to bill more for wedding work than any other event work. Meanwhile, venues, caterers, and transport services do not bill more for weddings, although they probably do bill more for some calendar dates other than others. So why do some of us have different rates? Because a wedding service is a different service. It costs more because it is more. So the wedding markup is real, and it's about 28% increase from vendors. Social media platforms like Instagram and Pinterest have heightened the expectations, with couples striving for picture-perfect weddings that mimic celebrity and influencer standards, driving up expenses. Especially since the introduction of social media content creators at everyday people's wedding, where they promote the weddings on social media, you feel pressure to live up to the expectations of other weddings. Not to mention, vendors promote themselves on social media, making other vendors feel the need to increase prices as well. If you're comparing yourself to influencers and celebrities, remember that many of them get sponsorships and free gifts and free services at their weddings. So do not compare your wedding to theirs. It's okay to have a different wedding. A lot of my lifestyle influencers, so they have to sell their lifestyle. And if you're not, and you're just a regular person trying to get married, you don't have to do all of that. And I'm not using average in a bad sense of the word. I'm just using it as an everyday person who has nothing to sell. So now that we've talked about cost, let's get to a very interesting point of this video, which is who pays for the wedding. I always love this conversation. Who is paying for this wedding? Because we have mentioned thousands and thousands of dollars, 5 figures to 6-figure weddings. So who's paying? Let's see. So traditionally, not just in Western cultures, but a lot of African and Asian cultures, the wife's family paid the most for the weddings. According to Emily Post, this includes the engagement party, the groom's ring, wedding and reception, the next day brunch, while the groom's family paid for the rehearsal dinner, the officiant's fee, and the marriage license. The groom also paid for the bride's engagement and the honeymoon. But in China, the groom and his parents are the ones who are expected to pay. This is traditionally, this is not what happens in these modern times. Because a lot of people's parents could barely pay for their college. You think you're gonna spend this much money on their wedding? Nope. So in today's day and age, a lot of families either pitch in where they can. Majority of time, the bride and the groom do pay for a bulk of their wedding. But oftentimes we forget about another group of people who bears the brunt of the cost of the wedding. And I'm talking about the bridesmaids and the groomsmen, because oftentimes they're responsible for paying for their outfits. The grooms, typically they can wear a certain suit, so unless it's a specific color, typically it's easier for them. But for the bridesmaids, they are more likely than not buying a brand new dress, whatever that the bride chooses, and they have to do their hair and makeup. And it may not even just be for the actual wedding, but also for the engagement party. And then they are also paying for any type of accessories that goes with the day and accommodation for the wedding, because sometimes it's far away. They have to go there way before the other guests and pay for specific accommodation to the bride's and groom's liking to make it easier for them on that day to get dressed and get ready. Sometimes it can be so specific that they even have to get a certain type of shoe so that they can all correlate.
I could put a down payment on a house with the amount of money I've spent on my friends' weddings. Okay, that's a little dramatic, but here's how much I actually spent so you can get an idea of what the price of saying yes is. For the first wedding I was in, the bachelorette party was in Palm Springs, and I spent $965 on this. For the wedding that preceded that bachelorette party, it was semi-local to me, so I spent $916. Bachelorette number 2 was in Miami, and I spent $1,425. That wedding was semi-local again, so this meant transportation was just driving distance. For the next wedding I was in, it was one of my high school best friends, and I helped plan the bachelorette in NOLA, which was $1,536. She also lives in Denver, so I had to fly my husband and I out there, so it cost just a little bit more than a local wedding. For the most recent wedding I was in, I was one of the maid of honor, so I helped plan the bachelorette party in Sonoma, which was semi-local to me. However, the wedding was in Maine, so the cost was definitely a lot higher for transportation. So here's the moment you've been waiting for. The grand total I've spent is over $10,000, and you can see the averages per event. If you thought I was done, joke's on you. I'm in 2 more weddings and have another bachelorette party next year, so please follow me so I don't go broke.
But the average cost of being a bridesmaid is anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800. And this does not even include if there's a bachelorette party, bachelorette trips, and any type of activities that are going on pre-wedding and immediately after the wedding. What makes it easier to be a groomsman is that they can often rent their outfits, so they don't have to spend any more than $100 to $200 to either rent the suit or buy one that they can use after the wedding. And with all this cost that we can put a price tag on, let's not forget the often priceless amounts of time that you spend with the bride and groom, often helping them plan the wedding, running errands for them, trying to fix whatever you can at pre-wedding events and at the wedding. So it comes with a lot of unpaid labor beyond the money that you spend to attend the wedding and to be a part of the wedding party. But it is often seen as a privilege to be invited to be a part of somebody's wedding party. I've been part of a wedding party and been an usher at several weddings. Always a joy to be, but I don't spend too much. Typically, they don't ask for specific hair and makeup. It's often the outfits, and some of them have even provided the outfits, which I'm very grateful on. But the most I've ever spent on a specific outfit was maybe $150, but most outfits often cost less than $50. Now let's move on to the next portion, which is gifts. Never plan a wedding expecting to get enough money to pay for the wedding. Couples do often receive monetary gifts that can offset the cost of the wedding after you've paid for everything. On average in the United States, a guest gives a gift of about $100 to the bride and groom. It is so important not to plan your wedding with this gift in mind. Pay for a wedding within your budget, not relying on what gifts other people can give you. So in this video, it was trying to communicate how different cultures give gifts, and I'd like to preface that in the comment section there was quite a divide. I did not know that in a lot of African American weddings people actually didn't give gifts, and I know it's not all African American weddings. You don't have to box people in there. I think there are different subsets of this. African culture, which is what I am more familiar with and what I grew up with, people do give gifts at weddings. I've actually worked books at weddings before, meaning when people give gifts I write it down and write down their names and numbers, and I've also done it at funerals and other events, and I can tell you that people do give gifts. It is very culturally significant that people help the couple set them up for their new life and to share love and to share help with them by giving them gifts. Because when I was reading the comment section, I was like, wow, like people actually go to weddings without giving gifts, anything at all. I was always taught that you bring a gift to a wedding. But let me know in the comment section if in your culture it is slightly different and what you think about that. There were a lot of people saying that if you want people to come to your wedding, don't expect them to give you gifts. People are going to buy new outfits, get their nails done, hair done for your wedding, and you still expect them to give you gifts, which I thought was kind of strange. Like, I'd rather skip on the hair and makeup, do it myself, even the new outfit, and rather just give them a gift. But apparently that's not every culture. So let me know what your culture does in regards to gifts in the comment section. Speaking of other cultures, I have been dribbling in some of my culture and some of the cultures around the world in this video already, but I did want to give you some specific cultural differences in weddings and give you example of my experience at Ghanaian weddings, and then also give you other cultures as well. So in Ghana, weddings are not one size fits all. It's very tribe specific. So if you have one tribe, they may perform wedding and wedding rituals in one way versus another tribe. Different regions as well, they look different. But one thing that is very common is a bride price. So bride price is not only just a Ghanaian thing, it's also prevalent in a lot of African countries. Essentially, the groom and his family bring a gift or money to the bride's family. Other times it's a long list. They will list like bring cloths, goats, cows, this amount of this amount, and then you have to bring all of those in order for the marriage ceremony to even begin. This bride price often shows that you can take care of the woman and you're going to be able to provide for her. In today's time, they would have the traditional wedding, which averages about $891 from what I could gather. And then there is the religious wedding, which from my research costs around $3,335. And just like how African weddings are multi-day celebrations, so are Indian weddings. We've all seen those huge Indian weddings with hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. Those are massive weddings, and those weddings often cost a lot of money. It was said that the average cost of an Indian wedding in India is about $13,000. And if you compare that to US dollars, that may not seem like a lot, but please remember that currency and a difference in economy is prevalent here. And that is made even clear in this report by KPMG, which stated that an Indian is likely to spend a fifth of his or her lifetime earnings on a wedding. Next is China. Weddings in China are very extravagant, and the average wedding is about $25,000. Even though this is very expensive, their culture of also giving a lot to the bride and groom often offsets the cost of this wedding. They typically give red envelopes, and it's very prevalent in a lot of Asian cultures because they want to give gifts to the bride and groom to start their lives off well. And I know Europe is not a country, but typically Europe is known for more modest weddings that are intimate and have small group of people, often less pricey compared to weddings around the world. But the wedding day is not where it ends. That's where their life begins, hopefully together forever. But often the next step after the wedding is a honeymoon. And according to honeymoon.com, 99% of couples take a honeymoon, with approximately 75% of newlyweds taking their honeymoon within the first week of marriage. A beach honeymoon is the most popular, and typically honeymoons average about 7 days. And 62% of couples actually pay for their own honeymoons, and the total cost goes between $2,500 to $3,500, or 15% of the wedding's budget. But there are people who love a luxurious honeymoon, and on the luxury side, those average about $9,950. In the United States, newlyweds spend approximately $12 billion per year on honeymooning. So we have heard all of these numbers, and people pay for themselves. Sometimes people have family help, but where is this money coming from? Sometimes it comes from the pockets of the brides and grooms and their families. Other time they seek the help of the bank to pay for their weddings. So let's talk about going into debt to pay for weddings. It is actually sad to report that most couples getting married today actually go into debt to pay for their weddings. And according to US News, 56% took out debt to pay for their wedding. 39% used credit cards, 18% for bank loans. Another 18% did family loans or a combination of them. Among those who borrowed money, 48% say they weren't expecting to go into debt when they were initially planning their wedding. 42% regrets going into debt to pay for their wedding. And this can easily happen when you underestimate the cost of a wedding. There's some people who go in thinking, I'm only gonna pay $20,000 for their wedding, and before they know it, they're paying $30,000 to $45,000. Because you want the day to be a day to remember. You want it to be beautiful. You want it to be everything you've dreamed of, and you can easily go over budget because you want it to be so perfect. And you want to have no regrets on that day. But going over budget and spending more than you wanted to, and especially going into debt, can have long-term financial implications for the couple, because it can affect them trying to save for a house, but now they're in debt, either on the credit card, the family loans, which can strain a lot of relationships, the personal loans, not to even bring about one of the biggest causes of divorce in the United States is finances. So you're increasing your chances of having financial problems and therefore getting divorced. And the reason why it is so dangerous to take out debt for your wedding is because more likely than not, this couple probably already have other debts. In the United States, it is not uncommon for people to have credit card debts, personal loan debts, and especially student loan debts. And paying for all of these debts is probably why they couldn't save more money towards their wedding. And now you're adding an additional debt that can cost anywhere from 0%, because some people do have a 0% credit card for a while, all the way to over 30%, adds extra strain to your marriage. And I don't even think I mentioned the fact that a lot of people have auto loan debt as well. So that's just a lot of debt to be in and starting your life as a couple. So now that we've gone through all of this, let's come to suggestions to reduce the cost of your wedding. Now, some of these will probably be easy to implement, others will be harder. The first is to set a realistic budget and stick to it. I started with realistic because you just have to know that certain things you can't get it for cheaper than a certain amount. But be realistic when you're initially setting a budget and saving towards that budget, and stick to it. Are there some things that are going to be not as nice because you can't just pay an extra $1,000 to get what you want? Sure, once you start being very flexible with your budget, that's when other costs can easily slip through, and before you know it, your budget has gone up 10, 20, 30, 50, and 100%. Next is to limit the number of people you invite. I know that for certain cultures, this seems almost impossible.
You know, and I'm not judging you, but I'm just saying everybody else is gonna.
Coming from a culture that is almost impossible not to invite everybody you've ever met and everybody your parents have ever met. As hard as it is, if possible, try to limit the number of people that you have. If you live in a culture where people do show up unannounced, I have been to a wedding where they did nameplates and they stuck to it before you can go into the venue. You had to get a table card to sit there. And as annoying as it is, and people will be mad, that can save you a lot of headache on your wedding day. Next is DIY decorations.
I started off by buying a 10 count of white bouquets from Costco.com. With how stunning the flowers were, I can't believe this was just $100. I started by organizing them by flower type and removing any excess leaves. Then came to actually building the bouquets. I started with some of the larger flowers in the middle, added greenery, and just built around that. I used rubber bands to keep the stems in place, and then I used a bread knife to even out the bottom. Don't judge. While I was getting my hair and makeup done, Sam finished them off with some ribbon, and they turned out so stunning.
And I saw this a lot when I used to watch Floral Weddings. That was one of my favorite shows on TLC. During the summertime, I would watch Say Yes to the Dress, Floral Weddings, and I think there were a few other wedding shows on there that were just the bomb. Some couples will make their own wedding decorations for their table, and it was always cute and a way to decrease costs. The next thing you can do is also opt for off-season dates for your wedding. On season will probably be around this time, but especially June. June is one of the most popular months for weddings. There's also July, May, August, October. So you can pick a less popular month, maybe January, February, March. I don't think they're popular for several reasons. You can pick one of those days and you'll probably get a cheaper venue, catering, photography, because a lot of those people will not be very busy, so they are more likely to negotiate to be a part of your wedding. Another one which I love is to have a weekday wedding. I know some people don't like this, but a Tuesday wedding, I'm telling y'all, most weddings typically happen on a Saturday, and now a lot of places are also considering Friday and Sundays to be part of the weekends. But if you had a wedding between Monday and Thursday, you can get that venue for sometimes 50% or even less. Beyond that, there's almost no competition, okay? Whatever wedding date you pick on a weekday, more likely than not, a lot of people will be free to do your wedding, because how many people do you know are getting married on a Tuesday or Wednesday? Not many. Now, I do have to say, there's some people who are going to be mad. You know, I don't want to take off a day from work to come to your wedding. But let me tell you, there are people who love a good party. African people love a good wedding party, okay? They will show up. And beyond that, if you give them ample time, I don't see why not. If you gave them anywhere from 4 to 6 months to mark their calendar, I think it's very reasonable. It's not like you're gonna call them and be like, hey, next month I'm having a wedding, come and show up on a Wednesday. that would be inconsiderate. But if you do it months in advance, they have the option to choose to take that day off to come to your wedding. Next is to consider alternative venues. So venues that are not the quintessential wedding venues. So maybe some parks, community halls. I've actually been to a couple of weddings at like a fire station, and it was actually pretty well done. And so there's so much that you can do as long as you're willing to think outside the box and not be too stuck on having that perfect wedding. Next is that you can simplify the cost of catering. So the menu, choose a buffet, so you're not having people serve them, but they can just serve the food, or have the food served to them once they go get the food, or just choose cheaper options for the food. Sometimes people go to weddings, and even if you pay $100 per person, the food is not always good. The 2 weddings I've been to that had really great food were buffets, and I'm pretty sure they cost less than per plate catering. Next is to borrow or rent an attire, whether it could be a wedding dress or the groom already renting his tux. I mean, that's already kind of low cost. But the bride, she can also get a wedding dress from a family member, or just rent the wedding dress because you're using it once and then never again. But I also understand the sentiment of keeping your own wedding dress. Not to mention in other cultures, I don't know if you know this, at least in Ghana culture, because my dad used to do photography for like weddings, funerals, and for the funerals, they would bury the women in their wedding dresses. But you can also opt into not just renting the dress, but getting a sample dress. It would be something that is not trendy, that is maybe not too modern, but it would definitely be cheaper and cost you less. One of my favorites is having a dry wedding. And apparently there are people who will not go to a dry wedding. So there are 2 benefits of that. 1, people who will not come because they don't care about you that much. And 2, cost savings on alcohol. Alcohol can add thousands of dollars more. So if you opt for a dry wedding, you're instantly saving $2,000 to $3,000. Or you can have a cash bar, but I like the dry wedding better.
Our cake was £444. We rented a Rolls Royce for 2 hours-ish, which came up to £350. MC, singer, instrumentalist, all of that came to 1.275. Our food and drinks came to around £3,200-ish. Our outfit, so myself and my husband's outfits, accessories, all of that stuff, came to around £5,000. We gifted our bridesmaids and groomsmen, and that came up to like around £1,000. Photography and videography was £4,860. Venue, but we had to leave at 4 p.m. So that was around £3,500. My hair and makeup came to a total of around £1,200. Our wedding planner was basically £1,000. We went away to like a spa retreat for 2 nights, and that came to around £1,000. All the other stuff we spent money on, like the website, registrar, the legal stuff, was £721, and that brings us to a total of £24,800, which is basically £25,000. I'm not gonna lie, we were so shocked by some of the prices that we were being quoted for things, but we had a beautiful time, and we were so happy with this part of our day and how it turned out.
Now let's get into my opinions. And remember, these are just my opinions. Weddings are expensive, and I do know some people consider it a money pit, but I would be a hypocrite if I told you that I will not be planning the most beautiful wedding. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that I'm just gonna buy a cheap dress from the thrift store, we're gonna go to the courthouse and go to a restaurant afterwards, because that is not me. So because of that, I do understand the brides and grooms who spend a lot on their weddings. I know this is a place about financial literacy and awareness, but let's admit it, there's a part of most people who do want a beautiful picturesque wedding, and that's okay. But here's some things that I learned from research and from my personal experience attending several weddings that I just think are great lessons that if you're having a wedding, you should try to implement or think of. Number 1, an expensive wedding is relative. It depends on the people. $100,000 for a wedding may seem like a lot of money, but depending on who the couple is, that could be a fraction of how much money they have. So for example, let's say a couple makes the average household income combined of $76,000. They may spend the average of $33,000 on a wedding, and you may see that as reasonable because it's the average. You may see that as very pricey as well. And then there's a couple that have a combined income of like $600,000 and they have a $100,000 wedding, and you may say, wow, that's like a lot of money. But if you look at it in proportions, the second couple are spending less percentage of their money on their wedding versus the first couple who are spending basically half of their household income of the year on that wedding. So an expensive wedding is relative, and because of that, I would urge you not to compare yourself. I would urge you not to be watching other people's pockets, and I would urge you not to judge people who have expensive weddings. There are times where I see very nice and expensive weddings on Instagram, and I just don't jump to the conclusion of, oh, they must have gone to debt for it. They must have been broke. Now, we do know the numbers. Over 50% of couples do go into debt, but that's not everybody. The remaining 46% or so, they don't go into debt. They pay for their weddings, and some of those include very expensive weddings because some people can actually afford it. And beyond a big income, there are people who are getting married later in life so they can afford more. For example, if I got married at, say, 20 years old, I would have almost no money to get married, okay? Depending on who I was marrying, the wedding would probably be very inexpensive versus, let's say I wait till I'm 35 to get married. It means I would have like upwards of a decade to save for a wedding. So even if I had a $150,000 wedding, I've had years to save for it. Older couples pay more money. It's okay. It's just that some people have more. Some people have been saving longer, and some people are saving aggressively towards a wedding than others. Some couples have no debt. Others do. There are some who will pay for an expensive wedding, and it's because they are debt free, so they can afford to spend more on their wedding. Another sentiment I often hear in comment sections is when people will say, I would skip out on the expensive wedding and do a deposit on the house. Or some people who did that, it was like 30 years ago, I had a cheap $500 wedding and we spent the rest of the money on going on our honeymoon and putting a down payment on a house. And that's good for you, but there's some people who have money to do both. Like I said, don't pocket watch people. There are people who already sometimes even have houses. The husband has a house, the wife has a house, and now they're combining their lives. There are people in their 20s that I know who are already purchasing houses. So if they're getting married, they don't need a down payment for a house. They already have a house. So that's why I would urge you not to judge couples and not to pocket watch people. Focus on yourself and determine what you would do. And if you're already married, you already spend the amount of money you wanted to, it's okay to let other people do the same. If they ask you for advice, feel free to give it, but don't judge couples that you don't know. And the reason why judging people that you don't know is even more useless is that sometimes they didn't even pay for the wedding. Sometimes their parents did. Maybe these are grandparents, and their parents will say, do whatever you want, I'll pay for it. And there's some cultures that the parents or the grandparents pay for the weddings. What do you look like judging people whose parents pay for their wedding? Don't have a wedding for social media, have it for the marriage. There are people who actually want a specific type of wedding because that's just who they are. There are people who wear different colors to their weddings. There are people who want to show their personality at their weddings, and that's okay. But make sure you're having the wedding for yourself and for your spouse to be. Don't have it for social media. Don't have it to promote it, because there's always going to be somebody who has more money. There's going to be always somebody who's going to do something more extravagant. Stay in the present and enjoy that wedding rather than thinking about what's going to do on social media. I would leave you with this. This is something that I never do, which is to judge the couple based on how much they spend on their wedding and then try to determine how long the marriage would last. There's this sentiment that if you spend $100 on an engagement ring and you spend $500 on your wedding, somehow it's going to last forever, versus the couple who spend $10,000 on an engagement ring and $50,000 on a wedding. Correlation does not determine causation. So you can't look at that and think, oh, their wedding is going to last. Sometimes it's tradition. So you can't determine how long a couple will last just because of how much they spend on their weddings. I will encourage you not to make such things and not to put such things into the universe, because you would not want somebody doing the exact same thing for you. You have your opinions, but sometimes it's not needed. So just wish the couple well. Focus on yourself and your marriage or your future marriage, because you may not be married. You may want to get married, so focus on that and don't focus on this couple who are starting their life out together in a holy matrimony. And no matter what, selling tickets to your wedding will always be tacky. I will not elaborate any further on that. But in conclusion, the rising cost of weddings is a significant financial challenge for many couples, influenced by historical traditions, modern expectations, and social media. By understanding the various expenses involved and implementing cost-saving strategies, couples can celebrate their union without incurring debilitating debts. Balancing tradition with practicality can ensure that wedding remain joyous occasion without causing long-term financial strain. So with that, bring this video to an end. Thank you all so much. I've been filming for so long, I think over an hour and a half. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. It's such a simple thing to chalk it up to people trying to spend too much, but it's complex and there's nuances with all of this, and hopefully you learned something just as much as I did when I was doing all of my research. So thank you all so much for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoyed this video and you think it added value to your life, be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you do not miss out on any of my future videos. Thank you all so much, and come back next Friday for another video. Bye.